Who's hungry? Welcome back to the channel and to the Wasteland Ecology series. It's me, Emmy the Cat Lady, and we're here at Sanctuary Hills at the cooking station because the next part of talking about Commonwealth ecology is talking about the food, who eats what food is available, all that kind of thing. Forgot I had a cat here. There is also a Slocum's Joe that I turned into an arcade because I felt like it. Basically, but yeah, we've got a nice little farm going out the back, and that's one of the biggest differences in this game compared to the previous entries to the series is that there's a bunch of new mechanics that have been added, a bunch of new creatures, and that does affect how we kind of see the world, because you have your settlement building aspect, the base building aspect, and that you have your settlers coming, and of course if you go into, I don't remember which button it is for the workshop mode, you have requirements for your settlers, so people will need beds, people need defence, but they also need food and water, as we know from all the talk about survival and things. So as the general of the Minutemen, of course you're expected to do most of the work and organising that, although at least you can assign people to tend to the crops so that you don't have to do that part. There's Sturges digging and nothing. But it's an important part of survival, and things have kind of changed a lot, and it's added a whole bunch of new stuff to the food web that compared to what we've looked at for Fallout 3 and Fallout New Vegas, as well as we do have different climate and different challenges, which means that certain creatures exist and different creatures to what we've seen previously, which I think makes things very, very interesting. So we've obviously got all the crops there, and most of them do have their kind of wild versions as well. So what we've got here, we've got some carrots, some melons, there's a gourd, some potatoes, which are a tomato and potato hybrid, which might sound kind of weird, but they are actually part of the same family of plants, potatoes and tomatoes. So there is potential for hybridization, maybe helped along by radiation. That's not out of the realm of possibility, because they're both part of the same family of plants as belladonna or deadly nightshade. Interestingly enough, up there, strong wants to eat people. Probably he does like doing that, but. Yeah, so we've got new creatures to contend with, new varieties of creatures. Oh, there's the Slocum's Joe. So, that's one thing about this game is that you can build a donut shop if you want. It's one of the Creation Club's things that I bought a while ago. Although this Brahmin is sort of levitating and locking the door at the same time, which is quite impressive. But physics engine notwithstanding, so there's quite a few things to kind of talk about as well. So I'm going to head out of the Commonwealth for now, and I'm going to get into the big food web chart that I have made. Very, very similar, same vein as the ones that we've done previously. They're a lot of fun to put together, actually, and it makes it really interesting to see it kind of laid out like that. Oh. I'm so glad I caught that. That was hilarious. It's just the Brahmin just appeared and then fell into the water. What the hell? Oh, I must have also added a mod that fixed this bridge, but that I don't know what's happening with that either. I think that's like an engine of some sort. Anyway, as I was saying, the physics engine and things in this game's got a bit wacky today, but fair enough, it's the weekend, so maybe it's taking a rest. So I will switch over to Obsidian and I'll see you there in just a second. Okay, here we are. So here is the chart complete with pictures, which I spent a lot of time sourcing and putting it all together. So we'll start here with the plants. Obviously the plants are your producers. They take energy from the sun, and they take nutrients from the soil and water, and they turn it into energy, which then other species can eat and gain the energy, and that's how it passes through. So I've kind of grouped all these ones together because these ones, by and large, are the ones that people are eating, although other animals will eat them as well. Carrots apparently hiding. Excuse you. Yeah. So, you've got your potatoes, tarberries, which have to be grown in water. So the only place that they're actually farmed is at the slog in the swimming pool. Your mute fruit, melon, carrot, gourd, and corn. Corn, or maize as it's known in some parts, is one of the biggest crops in the United States. So it's survived, as we know, we've seen it in Fallout New Vegas as well, and it's kind of continuing to grow. And then razor grain I've put separately. Razor grain is kind of a wheat substitute, although I don't think it's actually wheat, but it's kind of used in that same way, which means that it can be eaten by people, but it can also be eaten by our herbivores along with grasses and other plants. And there is actually quite a bit of that around in the Commonwealth compared to the capital Wasteland, where the plant life has been pretty thoroughly decimated outside of where Harold is. So there's a lot less of that, but in the Commonwealth, there's still a fair bit of that around in order to feed our herbivores. So we've got our main kind of herbivores up here. The Brahmin makes a return because, of course, it does. Cattle are one of the most important domesticated animals in human history, and they've survived because there were so many of them and because of their importance, and they obviously are used for food, but they're also used as pack animals, so they have retained that importance to human society. But we've added another ruminant herbivore in the rad stag, so this is deer. So venison's back on the menu, which is great. And given that they both have two heads, that probably makes their eating more efficient in terms of producing energy. So rad stags are quite commonplace around the Commonwealth, which makes them a viable food source both for humans and for other things as well. And then we've got our mole rats. Now, they live underground. They mainly eat roots more than anything else, but they do come up to the surface and attack. But that's their main kind of diet. And then we move up to the next level, so we'll leave the ocean side for the time being. So we've got our cats. There's a bit of a question mark over the cats because this is the only game we've really seen cats in. So are they real cats? Because they seem to be largely unchanged, while most other species have mutated to some degree. Are they synths? We don't really know. And obviously, most of the rodents are huge compared to your domestic moggies now. So it's not very clear what they eat, but I have kind of assumed that they probably do eat fish as well because fish is available, and presumably most of the cats that we see tend to be kind of domestic. But they'll find a way, I'm sure, because cats are very good at that. Then we've got our dogs that are probably eating most of these things. I mean, a pack of mongrels could easily take down a Brahmin or a rad stag and eat it, and dogs in the wild certainly canine species hunting packs, so it's not out of the realm of possibility, as well as our rodents and probably the bugs like our rad roaches and things are part of that as well. And then we do have a couple of new insects that have been added to the roster here. So we've got the blood bugs, which are mosquitoes. They're blood feeders, so they'll feed off just about anything, but you do see them on dead Brahmin, and they will attack rad stags, and they'll feed off us as well, because they drink blood, so, they're kind of more parasitic than predatory in that sense. The stingwings are scorpion flies, so they tend to eat insects and things, so they probably do eat our bloatflies, rad roaches and things as well. And then we've got the next level up for these predators. So the mutant hounds, not clear what they eat, but probably anything that they can get their hands on. They're big enough to potentially take down dogs, and they probably would eat humans if the opportunity presented itself. We've got our red scorpions, which tend to be kind of insectivores, so they're probably eating all the smaller bugs, all the insects that they can find, and again, potentially anything else that they might be able to get their hands on. Then we've got humans, and I'm classing non-feral ghouls as humans, although they are capable of eating things that humans can't. But humans are obviously omnivores, so they're going to be eating the crops that we grow, as well as meat that's obtained from all these sources. So you can eat the mole rats, you can eat the Brahmin and the radstag. Certainly, the Brahmin and radstag meat is probably the best of the options that are available in the Commonwealth. Feral ghouls, again, they tend to eat whatever they can get their hands on. And cannibalism, it doesn't seem to be quite as commonplace in the Commonwealth compared to elsewhere. But cannibalism is still a thing that exists, so we do have to be aware of that. And then we get up to the kind of higher level predators like the yaguai, the bears. Again, they probably eat the majority of these things below them. They probably will eat humans if they are desperate, but they don't seem to kind of go out of their way to hunt humans because, and bears are like that in real life as well. But if they feel like they need to, or if they're desperate, they probably will. Unlike the super mutants who probably would go out of their way to hunt humans, we know they do like eating people. Strong mentions it on a regular basis. Um, and that's the kind of thing. And then we get up to our apex predators, and this is pretty much the same as in the capital Wasteland, because the super mutants in the Commonwealth have more in common with the Vault 87 mutants than they do with the Mariposa mutants. And the behemoths make a return in this game as well, and they'll eat anything, including deathclaws actually, but deathclaws are also considered apex predators because they are bigger and stronger than everything else, and they'll go out of their way to hunt whatever they want to. So that's kind of our land-based creatures, but I do have another section over here which kind of comes from the water because we're on the Atlantic coast. There's a harbour, there's a lot of water around, fresh water and seawater, as we discussed last week. And that means that aquatic creatures are better established compared to what we see in Fallout New Vegas, which is a kind of landlocked desert. So there's not as much in terms of water life other than the fish in the lake and the lake lurks. But here, there's a lot more. So there are fish, and people do seem to fish. We don't really have the capacity to catch them ourselves in the game, but there is fish dotted about. There's the weird kind of whale dolphin thing that you find beached and dead occasionally, although we don't really get to see them alive. But there is fish, and that means that somebody's catching them. So we do see that. We also have the rad gulls who probably are making use of the fish. They're seagulls. They are kind of omnivores, but there's less people around eating ice cream and things on the beach for them to steal. So presumably fish is the mainstay of their diet, and then whatever else they can get their hands on. And I would assume it's the same for the Mirelurk hatchlings. So this, again, the Mirelurk repertoire has been expanded in this game. We do see the little eggs that hatch out, and then we've got the little tiny babies that come scuttling after us. Presumably if there's no people or other creatures around, they probably will eat the fish as well. Same for the kind of standard Mirelurks. And then we go up to the hunters, which are the kind of more lobstery ones, and the Mirelurk kings, which seem more like amphibians. I have kind of discussed all of that in the sort of species videos about the Mirelurks, because they have got more complicated in Fallout 4. But they do, and there's a chance that they maybe do eat their own young as well. Unfortunately, that's the case for a lot of species, as well as making use of the fish and whatever else they can get their hands on. And of course, we do have an apex predator in the Mirelurk family now, being the Mirelurk queens, again, because they're big and they're dangerous. Mirelurk queens are not easy to take down, even for, experienced soul survivors. Their acid spit is kind of terrifying, and the fact that they have these ambush tactics as well in the water. Very, very interesting. So that's what we've got there. I say I have put the cats as potentially eating the fish. I don't really know. I mean, cats are obligate carnivores, and I could give a 3-hour lecture on this matter because people do keep trying to make their cats vegan, and it drives me nuts because it's wrong. Um, but the cats seem fairly standard. So, uh, are there mice and they're catching the mice and we just don't see it? I don't know. It could be the cats or synths. And that brings me on to the other creatures that you might be realizing is kind of missing from this chart, which is the gorillas. So this section's not covering Yucca World. I'm going to do Yucca World separately because it does have its own unique creatures and things. So we're not talking about Yucca World on its own yet. So the only gorillas in the base game of Fallout 4 are the two synth gorillas in the Institute. So do they eat? I'm assuming that they do, but do they need to eat? It's not clear. I mean, synths definitely, the human synths definitely seem to have a digestive system, but whether that's just so that it looks like they're eating so they can blend into human society because people would get suspicious if people don't eat, um, or whether that's something that's actually necessary for them to fuel their functioning or what, it's not very clear. So it might be that these gorillas don't need to eat, but maybe they can eat. But they are kind of omnivores in the wild, so who knows? And the same goes for the crows. So we know the crows are synths as well. They're basically flying spy drones for the Institute. Crows are omnivores. They'll eat insects, they'll eat carrion, they'll eat fruit and nuts and all kinds of things. But the synths crows need to eat. Do they eat anyway to avoid suspicion? It's not clear. It's something that all the talk about the synths that it's never really addressed by the Institute or by anybody else is whether synths need to eat. They might be capable of eating, but whether they need to eat or not is a different question. That they could survive for a long time without any food. It's possible. So yeah, a bit of an interesting one there, and you do get gorilla meat, but I don't think you can eat it, or I don't think you can cook it into anything. It's all very strange. It's all very strange. And then of course we get to our kind of carrion eaters and the things that'll basically eat dead things like this decaying Brahmin that we've got here, which are obviously our old favourites, the radroaches and the bloatflies. Relatively weak in that sense, and probably do provide good food for some of the bigger and more dangerous creatures, and then our fungi. So we've got the glowing fungus, and then Fallout 4 does add the brain fungus as an item that can be collected. It was kind of present in the other games, you could see it, but it was just there for, set dressing rather than anything. But in this game, it is functional, and you can use it for certain things, and you can technically eat it, which is interesting. So, it definitely gets a wee bit more complicated now because we do have a lot more kind of sea life, if you will. And again, that's a factor of the location because we are on the sea, we're on the coast, whereas previous games we haven't really been. I know DC is quite close to the coast, but it's not really on the coast. So you've just got the Potomac River there, but Boston, famously has a harbour that's full of tea. That there's a whole thing happened there in history. But so we do the Mirelurks have clearly got themselves well established up to the point where we have these monstrosities that exist, and they employ all kinds of tactics. And the Radgulls as well. And again, they're just there. They don't really do anything. You can kill them, but why would you? They already look pathetic. It would have been a fun mechanic if you picked up food near a Radgull, it would fly in and steal it from you. That would have been quite funny, but probably not feasible or have any point to it. It just would be quite funny. Because seagull behaviour in the real world is notorious for that. Certainly the British seasides. And well, I mean, I remember during lockdown, I was getting really annoyed because where I worked, it was in the vet practice was inside a pet store in a retail park, and there was a McDonald's and a KFC. And this was during lockdown, and I was really annoyed about it because Um, Someone was sitting in their car. They'd obviously been to McDonald's drive-through, and they were waving chips out the window. So the seagulls were circling and they were leaving a lot of mess on my car, and I was just like, "Why are you feeding them?" They just keep coming back because you're feeding them. There was also one that used to hang around the back, um, like out the back of the store that used to get fed dog biscuits and was nicknamed Stephen. So this, but it's just that it's kind of interesting. And then we've got these kind of big dangerous things that can crop up. Your death claws are doing really really well here. And we've got the super mutant behemoths make a return as well. And I think the other thing that's very interesting is that, they've updated the mechanics for combat. So a lot of these creatures employ specific tactics that we never really saw before. The mole rats hide underground, the rad scorpions hide underground and can jump out and ambush you. The Mirelurks employ ambush tactics as well. They'll hide at the edge of the water and then pop up when you get too close. And the queens, Mirelurk queens, usually just come swanning out of the water, ready to destroy you. Um, they're not visible until they come out of the water and things. So it's very very interesting. So we do have a lot more options for food here, and the fact that the game has a mechanic for growing food, which I think is really interesting, and we do see a bit of that in Fallout New Vegas. We can't plant anything ourselves, but lots of the well-established settlements do have little farms going. Good Springs, most of the houses in Good Springs have got plants growing in the garden and things like that people are farming food. Um, but there's a lot of things that complicate the situation, and especially the synths and the super mutants make things a bit more complicated. The super mutants obviously are a big problem because they will attack and eat people, and they're everywhere. And the synths as well is kind of, it puts a bit of a question mark over certain things because of can synths eat other things, and B, can other things eat synths? Is that possible? Is that safe? Because we know that they're artificially made, but the Gen 3 synths are artificially made with organic materials, so can they can we eat them? Cats are definitely a bit of a question mark because every other kind of species has changed drastically after the nuclear war and the radiation things, but cats haven't. They're just the same as they always were. I mean, from a sort of predator design standpoint, cats are cats are cats. They behave pretty much the same way. It doesn't matter whether you're talking about tigers or domestic cats or the in any kind of cat species, big or small. They all behave basically the same way. Though they have a lot in common with each other in terms of their physiology and stuff as well. That they're very efficient predators. That's kind of how evolution has shaped them. So it's one of those, if it's not broke, why fix it kind of thing. Or have the institute just been making cats because they can and because they felt like it? Um, and what could domestic cats eat? Because there's no rad rats or anything. They show up again. You see them in Nuka World. You don't see them in the Commonwealth. And they'd be about the same size as a cat, if not bigger. Or is there tiny little mice running about and we just aren't aware of it? But yeah, I do have some questions about that. I mean, don't get me wrong, being the cat lady, I like seeing cats in the game. I like having cats in the game. I think it's kind of fun. This one specifically is Dora, who is the one that lives at Covenant, I believe. But yeah, questions need to be asked about the synths and the crows and things like that. But only the institute can answer that question, and unfortunately, certainly in my playthrough, they don't exist anymore, so they can't really answer that question. But other than that, I think it's very very interesting, and I do like that we do have some differences. There's different creatures. There's because they've mutated and evolved and adapted to the specific location that they're in. And that's how the ecosystem works, is that you either have to improvise, adapt, and overcome, or you're going to risk dying out. And that's kind of what happens here. So now that we've covered the Commonwealth, we are going to dig into some of the DLCs for the games that have their own environments and things, particularly Honest Hearts. I think there's a lot of interesting conversations to be had about that one, because again, it's a different environment. It's got different features compared to the Mojave Wasteland, all that kind of thing. Nuka World has a lot going on, and a lot of it is to do with, because it's a theme park and because of certain things like the River of Quantum that's having an impact on the Mirelurk population there, all that kind of stuff. So a lot of interesting conversations to be had about these places. So that's what we're going to tackle next. But hopefully you guys enjoyed this. As always, I do love to hear your thoughts in the comments, especially, if any of you have got any kind of opinions or thoughts about the synths and about, how food relates to the synths, whether they need to eat or whether they're just doing it to pretend that they're not synths, to try and hide themselves. What you think about the cats? Be curious to hear from you guys on that. So thanks very much for watching and listening, and I'll catch you guys next time. Bye.